Welcome, everyone, to our weekly Torah learning of spreading more light into the world. We always like to start off with giving because how we give, that's how Hashem will give to us. Let's give generously, so Hashem will give us generously. I'm going to put some coins in the tzedakah box. Please join me from home. Tzedakah is protection. Okay, so we always start off with Tehillim. And the Tzemach Tzedek said if we only knew the power of Tehillim, we would say it day and night. Generally, we don't say Tehillim at night, but being that so many people need our prayers, it's okay to say Tehillim. And I'm going to say some names that are very dear people in my personal life that needs a Yeshua and a refuah. And please God, everyone's prayer should be answered, and we're including everyone's names. So refuah shalema for Avram ben Fega Golda, refuah shalema for Yosef ben Dvorleah, refuah shalema for Yosef Yitzchak ben Bela, refuah shalema for Rezel Basadas, refuah shalema for Rafal Chaimer ben Sima Chasha, refuah shalema for Yosef Shlomo ben Risha, refuah shalema for Devorah Leah Bas Yafa Liba, refuah shalema. Devorah Leah Bas Yafa Liba is a dear shlucha and friend and ambassador that really, really needs Yeshua's. Refuah shalema for Mercedes ben Esther, refuah shalema for Tzipora Bas Yocheved Zisel, refuah shalema for Gershon Leib ben Menucha, refuah shalema for Binyamin ben Esther, and everybody that needs should have a complete refuah shalema. So we're going to say Psalm 20, Kapitel Chaf. Lam natseach mizmar leDavid yancha Adonai b'yom tzara. Yisagevcha Shem Elehei Kai v'yishlach ezracha mikadesh. Umitzian yisadeka yiskar kol min chaysecha v'elascha yidash nesela. Yitain lecha chilva vevcha v'chol tzascha yimalei. Neranena b'shuasecha u'v'shem Eloheinu nidgal yimalei Adonai kol mishal esecha. Ata yadaiti ki Yashia Adonai mishicha yanehu mishmei kachay b'goresh Hashem yinai. Ela v'racha v'ela v'sosim v'anachnu v'shem Adonai Eloheinu naskir hema karo v'nafalu v'anachnu kamnu v'nisaydad Adonai Hashia Hamelach Yaninu B'yan Karinu. I do these classes weekly in memory of my dear grandmothers, Rivka Dina Bas Yosef Yehuda. I hope you're proud, known as Riva Minkwitz. My other grandmother, Bela Bas Betzalel. I hope you're proud. To save a life is saving a world, and he saved many in the Soviet Union. My dear great uncle, Chaim Ber Holshansky, his full name is Chaim Dov Ben Betzalel. Also for son Zahara Bas David, a very dear friend's sister and sister-in-law who perished in a terrible fire. Hashem should send Mashiach and immediately for everybody. And my two uncles who passed away this year. Not every gem is a giant, and not every giant is a gem. Rabbi Lipsker was both a giant and a gem. So I'm going to say his full name. Reb Shalom Dober ben Reb Eliyahu Akiva. Also, for my other dear uncle, Michal Vashetsky, every room he would walk into, the room would light up, and now the heavens are lit. For Yechiel Michal ben Moshe. And looking forward to Mashiach to coming to be reunited for all of our loved ones. So tonight's class I'm really excited about because I heard about this chassid pretty much my whole childhood. And I happen to I know some of his children, and I've been bothering, I don't know if it's a bother, but I've been nudging Suri for such a long time that I really want her to speak on my class. She's like, what am I going to speak about? I said, I don't know, but I think you have what to share. And not that I think, I know. And recently I reached out to her and I'm like, can we do a class? I'm like, what about doing something about your dad? Because I heard about your father. My father is someone that was, every time I mention your father's name or his name's mentioned, my father has a sparkle in his eye. They were very close. And my father knows a lot about your father, and they used to bring many long nights together when he would be in Crown Heights visiting. And when my father even knew like certain things that no one knows, because they would bring throughout the night when the rebel, like they would get calls, what was going on in 770. So I felt like it was really meaningful to me, and I hope it will be meaningful to you, this class. It also happens to be today, which was Rosh Chodesh Adar, his Yartzeit. So then this is the night after, which is Bay's tonight. We are going to honor his special and holy neshama. When you see his face shortly, because we're going to start off with a video, you're going to see his face. He has the face of a, like, just, it'll make you smile when you see his face. He just looks like the sweetest, most special, cutest, holy man. So I'm excited about this class to hear so much about him from his special daughter, because a daughter knows their father like nobody else. That's just how it usually is. And we're gonna hear actually words from Rabbi Gershon Mendel Garelik himself. He was interviewed by Gem, huge fan of the Gem, um, which Suri Krinsky's husband actually founded Gem. Okay, so hopefully one day we will bring that to life. But we try to bring in a Gem video whenever we can that is appropriate and just goes with the classes and the topics. And there's just so much, and we're so blessed. But he is the one that had this insight to bring people's interviews to the world. And we have so many gems because of her husband. So we're very grateful. But behind every special man, there's the woman. So you are his partner in crime in a lot of his projects that people probably don't even know about. So we'll hear more a little later. If anyone has any questions, they could put it in the chat and we will address it at the very end. So we're going to start off now with a video to introduce. I don't even know how to put it into words about Rabbi Garelik, but you will see in the video a little bit about his life.
Tov Shin Chai. Bin ich gewinn nach der Chassene. Und jemals zu hungern, der Rebbe wegen Schliches. Wir haben schon beide gewusst, als es ein Forte Schliches.
Said soll sich nicht begnügen und sagen, als ist jeder damit, was macht, lichtig bei sich in Hui. Sie und wir kein auf noch Aiden und wo nur die Kennst der Griechen und bringt sie zu Hart Sinai, wo dort hört jeder Ried und nicht die Hawaii Kirche.
Jene Zeiten, etwas fahre Jud Kislev dort nirgends, gehe ich dort in 77. Und Punkt, wenn ich komme, geht Omrich bei Chadakov und sagt mir, dass der Rebbe will es fahren in Europa. Frage ich, wo in Europa? Sagt, was ist denn auf Gemine? Italien, Milan, Adugna. Nur geben ein Teer, ein Stückchen Jemut, als einer soll wegfahren vom Reben. Ich kann nicht geben kein Moschel. Das ist, als if einer soll gefäß stehen auf dem 10. Stock und herumfahren sich ab. Cholifn ist dort bei 77, ich bin zugeriet der ganze Haus von vorne weg. Und wir sind rein auf eine Weile zum Reben inwendig. Mit schon gehalten bei Rüsgehen, mit der Mal, der Rebbe hat sich aufgestellt und gegangen, gedummen Satanie und gesagt, nu, wenn wir auf dem Plane, wir können nicht wissen, öfter das Treffen nicht müssen, was darf Tanje, wird ihm geben, Tanje. Wir sind nach Ruiz und da ich bin eine ganze Reile und dort mit mir gehabt. Ja, sie war geschossen mit der Rebbe ist Ruiz und gewartet, bis mir reinkam.
Sei soll das Spielen auf die alle Kinder, was die Eltern fielen sie herab vom Weg mit eines von Spitzchabad. Und mir letzte Jahr nach sie mit uns verkehrt, wie mir sagte, wollen sie bleiben größer Sidim und größer Lomdim und größer Yerushalayim, soll sie der Rebester helfen in Seherweg, war nach noch beschämt von Israel, von dem Reben vom schweren Nidgel, wie steht in Hemmschach von Risa Machwo, was mir will, als Ben Meller soll Matzliach sein. Darf sich nie gefunden mit seinen Taten, Chotscha viele der Tate geht mit der größeren Bord. Darf sich nie gefunden mit seiner Mutter, Chotsch die tragt der größeren Schädel oder auch gegolte Haar. Nur darf wegfahren in der Medine, wie ihm schickt
Wir sitzen im Plane, weil der Rebbe gegeben hat Tanja. Und ich habe gegeben so. Nun schreit auf mir, weil man darf sitzen und ich Geschäft habe ich. Der Rebbe gegeben Matanje. Und ich sehe keinen mit der Token nicht. Das ich bin in der zweiten Klasse. Gehe ich in der ersten Klasse. Ich habe keinen nie gesehen. Und sie kommen zurück. Und ich sitze mit meinem Balabostitschkeschen und der Chassene. Wir haben beide gewähnt. Hebt sich an die Schliches. Und gleich als ein Heil und Weste. Mit einmal kommt ein besonderer Chevremann. Ganz ein schöner Chevremann. Und ich gebe Kuckere mit einem Akif. Und sagt auf Englisch, ich sehe, als ist ein Chabadnik. Efter hat eine Tanje. Das ist der erste Baruch bei unseren Schliches.
Demut wird mit Kuyim, Adishem, mit Zade, Gever, Kinono. Vedarke Jechpot, der Rebestelle, der Mamschich von sein Jechpot von dem Teinug, Hoelin, soll sein Bahatzlocho, Gdelo, Muflogo, Gorki Pshute, Bechol HaMitzarech, Lohem, HaMisaskim, HaMishtadli, Minefesh, Yad Bosser.
We came to Italy, we knew no one or anything. And somehow the Zippels just sort of, took over. They would call us and we were there. And they showed us this very nice 2-bedroom, living room, kitchen apart, just right for a young couple married 6 months. It would have been perfect. My husband looked at it and no, he didn't want it. So they took us to show us the other apartment. Very big, very in terrible, terrible condition. Very, very primitive. We walked through the house, and my husband goes, "This is more ufarat tzadik." I got 2 tables and 50 chairs, so we should be able to bring. I made a floor plan of the apartment, and I sent it to the Rebbe. And I said, and in this room we're doing this, and in this room we're doing that. Siri Chabad is going to start here, and the Shmuasin are being translated here. And and one time, the Rebbe was talking about us, and so Reb Zalman Zuchman, he called out, they have 12 rooms.
Das haben alle gehört, und bald ist gewesen Adar Apostel, das gedacht ist worden mehrere Jahren. Wir werden in Frieden sich zugereden, in dem ich mich mit 10 Jahren, zu 12, zu 13, zu 14, gedeiht zu haben in Milan 12 Zimmer.
And that whole first year, at every Fabrengen, there was a l'chaim for him and for me.
Da mit der Gershon Mendel Garelik, mit dem Rose wie dort, wegen zu schwitten. Soll sagen l'chaim für Gershon Mendel Garelik, aber auf der Käse Godel. Und sagen für die Schwester, wie der Salman, Reb Salman, für die Schwester, l'chaim gebrochen.
I remember Chadikov saying to me, when you come, you'll start with the youth, you'll start a school. No one wanted a school. And I remember once writing to the Rebbe and saying, I feel like my neshama was sent down to this earth just to knock on doors and hear them say no. The Rebbe said, it seems from your letter as though you have doubts as to whether the one that sent you made a good choice. Surely you don't have those doubts, even though I won't take it personally if you do. But being as I'm sure that you don't have those doubts, and that the one that chose you chose wisely, continue on with your work, and in Yirtzeit Hashem, you will be Matzliach.
Antiken Jahre hat sich geöffnet, Jud Gimel Tammuz im Chag HaGiulo, der Rest der Gan Israel, was sie da in Europa, durch Harav, Rabbi Gershon Mendel Garelik, mit all Attituden, zu welcher Israel zusammen im Zogose Harabonis, mit allen Titeln, zu welcher sie Israel. Haben sie dort aufgestellt, ein Beis Chinuch Libonim und ein Beis Chinuch Libonis und Shiurim Ligdelim und eine Sache, was alle Chassidim von Europa bis Spitzchabad haben das noch nicht gekonnt aufstellen. haben das aufgestellt an Amerikaner geborene Mädel mit einem Engel, was sie geboren geworden in Russland. Und danach hatten sie verschickt gewesen. In Italien schon Jovan und die Engelach und die Mädelach von dort sollen nach Reis kommen, Zera, Berech, Hawaii, sollen gehen bei Reishon, Leneged, Mashiach, Zitkenu.
So now that we saw this incredible video of the beginning of the shluchos, how they went off, and they literally took everything the Rebbe they wanted, and on the plane they started to cry because they felt that they couldn't do the mission of distributing this Tanya, and then they realized it did happen. They really felt the Rebbe's blessing, and obviously they did shluchos, but there was a lot of they started off with, like she said, a room that wasn't so polished, many rooms that weren't so polished, but they chose the one that would work to make an ufaratsta, to make a really big difference in Milan, Italy, and it surely did. In 61 years of, now you'll tell me the exact years, but they went on shluchas, I believe, many, many years ago. The Rebbe chose them to go on shluchas, and we're going to hear from Suri what it means to be a chassid. And we already saw what it means to be a chassid. Both her mother and father are the examples of what it means to be a chassid of the Rebbe. And Suri, we're honored to hear from you today.
Thank you, Chaya. I'm actually honored to be here. I'm always honored to speak about my father, about my parents in general. Today was my father's Yartzeit, Aleph Adar, so it's in his honor. And when I speak about my father, I speak about my mother. It's one and the same. So some stories will be about my father or my mother, but whatever they really did everything as a team. And as my mother always says, the Rebbe did not send on shlichus a man with his wife. It was a couple. Whoever went on shlichus, the Rebbe sent them as a team. So being that it's my father's Yartzeit, I'd like to speak a little bit about him. My mother is Baruch Hashem with us and will be Mir Hashem for many more years. She's still going strong and is still the dynamic Rebbetzin principal, role model for many, many, many over the whole world. So my father, people have asked me to speak about him since, 5 years ago. Today was his 5th Yartzeit. And I have thought about, how sometimes I only have a few minutes, and I need to encapsulate in a few sentences my father. And when I need to do that, I think of my father as a person that emulated unconditional love. He had unconditional love for the Eibishter, for Torah, for the Rebbe, for everybody, for all Yidden, for anyone that he encountered. And of course, as a father, he had unconditional love for his children. But I think that anyone that met him felt his care and love and could see that he truly loved them. I remember many different people that went through our home that felt my father's true love for them, and he truly did love them. My father's life did not begin in a very I shouldn't say happy place. It was communist Russia. His father, my Zayde Chaim Meir Garelik, had actually learned in Lubavitch, in the town of Lubavitch, in the original yeshiva, and therefore he was a chassid himself, and he himself was actually a shliach of the Rebbe Rashab, who was the 5th Lubavitch Rebbe. At that time, I don't think they used the word shlichus, but the Rebbe did give him certain missions to complete or to take care of, and he actually did them. He came to Lubavitch as a young boy. He must have been, I think, before Bar Mitzvah or just around Bar Mitzvah, because his older brother was a mashpia in the yeshiva in Lubavitch, and he encouraged his younger brother to come and join him. And he's the one that brought him. That's why he was a young boy. I don't think most boys that went to Lubavitch were that young, but because his older brother brought him with him, he actually spent Lubavitch from a pretty young age. So he had this chassidus in him. When my grandfather got married, I don't know exactly where they lived, but my grandmother's name was Rivka Leah. They lived somewhere in Russia. And when they had two children, their two oldest daughters, they wanted very much to move to Eretz Yisrael. So my grandfather, as a proud chassid, said, okay, I'm going to have to go to Rostov, to where the Rebbe lives, and ask him for a bracha to go to Eretz Yisrael. So he went to Rostov, and he went into Yechidus, and he told the Rebbe he was asking a bracha if he should go to Eretz Yisrael. And the Rebbe said to him, was sagen die Kinder? What do the children say? So my Zayda went back home. His two daughters, I believe, were 4 and 2. Hadassah, the oldest one. He said, Hadassah, do you want to go to Eretz Yisrael? And she said, no, she doesn't want to go. I'm sorry. He said, Hadassah, do you want to go to Eretz Yisrael? Hadassah said, yes, I want to go to Eretz Yisrael. And then he asked the younger daughter, Yocheved, who was barely talking. He said, Yocheved, do you want to go to Eretz Yisrael? And she said, no. So my Zayda was a little bit taken aback, and he wasn't sure what he's supposed to do. So he went back to Rostov, he went back to the Rebbe, and he said, the younger child said she doesn't want to go. And apparently the Rebbe agreed with that. He said to my Zayda, you are needed right now here. And he sent him to Crimea. They called it Krim, which was the opposite side of Russia. I don't know exactly Ukraine and Russia when it became Ukraine, when it was Russia. I believe at the time it was Ukraine.
And this is the previous Rebbe?
Before the previous Rebbe.
Okay.
His father. The
Wow.
father of the previous Rebbe, the Rebbe Rashab, told him to go to Crimea because over there was, I'm not exactly sure how, these things worked back then, but there were about 10,000 Jews living there. And they were very, I don't know if they were displaced or they were not in a good place. I don't know how observant they were of Torah mitzvahs. They were very broken people, and they didn't have guidance in Yiddishkeit. And he felt that they needed someone there, a rabbi, a sheikhet, a moihel, someone that can help them with everyday life. A sheikhet, to slaughter chickens, and a moihel, when somebody has a baby boy, to be able to do brisim. And I believe the Rebbe sent my Zayde and Reb Peretz Mochkin. There were two Chassidish families there, the Gareliks and the Mochkins, and they were, I believe, the only Chassidim there. So that's where my father was born, in I believe the place is called Simferopol, but it's in that area. And so he was raised by a very, very Chassidish father. His father was a very disciplined person, but very loving at the same time. And that's where his first year of life were spent. It was a beautiful place, but very far from other Chassidim. He didn't grow up in a community of Chassidim. So I know that his whole childhood, he really yearned to be near Chassidim. When he got a little older, they moved to a different part of Russia where the communists were very, very strong and very powerful, and they had a stronghold on the people. They had this indoctrination that everybody has to be atheists. Nobody can practice any religion, and especially Yidden suffered terribly from this. My Zayda was a chassid. He had a beard, and he was very visibly a chassid. If he would walk out in the street, you could tell in a second who he was. So it was very dangerous for him to even walk in the street. And yet, he was a teacher of young children. He taught in the Cheder. I actually spoke to quite a few of his students. I have a few interviews of older men in Crown Heights that remembered my Zayda as children, and they all described him the same way. Very strict and strong in his ideals and his values, but also very kind. They knew that he loved them, and they loved him in turn. But whatever he did, and he also performed brisim, of course, and he was a sheikhet, And for a time, he used to travel, he used to leave home every Motzei Shabbos, Saturday night, and come back Thursday for Shabbos. And every day, every night, he would walk to a different town, and during the day perform whatever he needed to do to help the Jews, and the next night travel to the next town, and that's how he spent his weeks. And unfortunately, the communists didn't like this, and he was arrested a few times, quite a few times, and Baruch Hashem came back home each time. Now, I'm sorry, I regress. When he went to the Rebbe, when the Rebbe sent him to Crimea, he told him, go to Crimea now, but I give you a bracha that one day you will get to Eretz Yisrael. So my grandfather lived with this bracha. He knew that one day he will end up in Eretz Yisrael. As a matter of fact, one of the times that my Zayda was arrested, this was already after my grandmother had passed away. My father was a young boy when his mother passed away. He was about 8 or 9 years old at the time. So when he was about 10 years old, one time when the communists, the KGB, got a hold of him and came to arrest him, 2 armed men came to take him, and they were walking him out the door. So my 2 aunts and my father were home. There was another brother, but he was not home at the time. So the 3 of them started crying. They were very scared. Their mother had passed away. Their father's being arrested. Who knows if they'll ever see him again? Are they going to be orphaned of both parents? So they were very distraught. And my Zayde turned to them and he said to them in Yiddish, "Daiget nicht. Der Rebbe hat gegeben a Brache, als ich will noch liegen auf Har HaZeisim. I will be buried on Har HaZeisim. The Rebbe gave me a bracha that I'll make it to Eretz Yisrael. I will be buried on Har HaZeisim. I will be buried on the Mount of Olives." And that gave the children, of course, some encouragement. He did come back home, a different man physically. His children hardly recognized him because he refused to eat any non-kosher food in the prison. And also, he was there over Pesach. And every single day, what they gave the prisoners was a little piece of bread and a sugar cube. So for the 8 days of Pesach, my grandfather exchanged the piece of bread for a sugar cube. So he had 2 sugar cubes a day over Pesach. And the day after Pesach, I think he collapsed because I guess you can't exactly survive on just 2 sugar cubes a day. But he kept Pesach. He did not eat any chametz. So this is the kind of chinuch my father grew up with. This is the kind of role model my father had. When all the Chassidim ended up at one point in Samarkand, this was shortly before they left Russia. Many Jews ended up in Samarkand, not only Chabad Chassidim, but this was before fleeing. It was the time of his bar mitzvah. At the time of his bar mitzvah, he was already orphaned of his mother. He only had a father, and they had very, very little in the physical sense. And the day of his bar mitzvah, my father told us this story of the day of his bar mitzvah a few times, and I was actually very moved when my father would tell us this story, because he actually shared it with us on the day of one of my nephew's bar mitzvahs. So when my father got up to speak, and my father was by then a renowned rabbi, a very renowned Chossid, and a Rav, and people looked up to him as a very learned person, I thought he's going to share with us a Torah thought, something, a pilpul, something, a maimer, and chassidus. And yet, when he got up, he said, "I would like to tell the story of my bar mitzvah." What was the story of his bar mitzvah? They were in Samarkand, in a place where people were very poor in the physical sense, but very, very rich in their emunah and their Torah and chassidus, of course. So there was some herring and maybe some mezainis. and his aunt, who we lovingly called Mume Mariashe Garelik / Shagalov, because she was married to her esteemed husband, Yitzchak Elchanan Shagalov, who himself had been also tremendous Chossid, had been arrested and taken away, never to be seen again. So at the time, they weren't sure if he was still alive or not, but she was a single mom, let's say that. So my father didn't have a mother, and his cousin Zalman didn't have a father. Now Zalman had had his bar mitzvah a few months before him. They were the same age, but a few months apart. His bar mitzvah, I believe his birthday was Shmini Atzeres. So, and my father's birthday is right after Pesach, Ches Iyar. So Mariashe said to her son, Janke, that's how she called him lovingly. His name was Zalman. She called him Janke. Janke, today is your cousin's bar mitzvah. For your bar mitzvah, I provided, she somehow found or bought a pair of brand new pants. I don't know how brand new they were, but they were new for him. She says, for your bar mitzvah, you had new pants. Your cousin is having his bar mitzvah today. He doesn't have new pants. Give him your pants so that he can celebrate his bar mitzvah with new pants. And of course, his cousin gladly and immediately handed his pants over to his cousin and gave it to him for his bar mitzvah. And at first, when my father shared this story with us, I was wondering, why is he telling us this story instead of teaching us something, you know? And the more I think about it, the more I see the truth, you know? These people, my father, his aunt, his father, his cousin, they lived emes. Being kind to another person is more important, shows more your integrity, your chassidus, your essence, more than all the Torah you can learn. And this is how my father was really his entire life. But as you see, he really had amazing role models. So when they left Russia, it wasn't simple. It wasn't simple. You weren't allowed to leave Russia. Not only that, people at the time weren't sure, should we stay, should we go? Some were screaming, we have to leave, we have to leave. We can't stay here, it's too dangerous. You can't be a frum Jew here. It's a life danger. From one day to the next, you don't know if you're going to be dead or alive. If a child went out to get some food, you never knew if the child would come back home. And there were children that didn't return home. And there were fathers that were arrested and didn't come back. And every morning when somebody walked out of the house, they weren't sure if they would be seen again. So at that time, I don't want to go into the politics of the time, but there had been a lot of Polish prisoners that had been brought from Poland to Russia. To make a long story short, the only people that were legally allowed to leave Russia were these Polish citizens. So some Chassidim, and among them, I would like to mention Reb Leibel Mochkin, because I know that he was very instrumental, and his two brothers, Reb Muller, Reb Shmuel, and Reb Yosef. These were people that were, and Reb Mendel Futefas, I know that these were people that were very, very instrumental.
I just also wanted to say my great uncle, he was also part of it. I interviewed him, Chaim Ber Wolshansky from Australia.
Okay. I'm sure there was a whole group of them, of very, very brave and courageous. And they were young. I believe Rabbi Leibel Mochkin must have been 18, 19 years old. He wasn't, we're not talking about here these entrepreneurs that are in their 30s. But they felt that it was very important to leave. And what they did was they somehow created these false passports. They found names of Polish citizens or birthdays, or I don't know exactly what they did, but somehow all these Chassidim were given passports with their own name in there, or sometimes maybe other people's names, but as Polish citizens. So my father's passport says he was born in Vilna, Poland. My father has never set foot in Poland, and his birth is October 15th, and my father's real birthday is the week after Pesach in Iyar. So just to tell you, that's how they all miraculously left Russia. Unfortunately, some of these people that were helping them were caught. I mean, Reb Mendel Futterfass and the two Mutchkin brothers were caught, and they were imprisoned. They paid for it. Years of their lives were spent in a Russian prison in Siberia, wherever they were fashikt, where they were sent, and they paid for it. And I don't think I ever saw any resentment on their part. When they came out, they all came out as proud and rebuilt their lives like nothing ever happened, as the Rebbe instructed them to. But anyway, so my father and his family left Russia with these false passports. When they left, they had very, very few possessions with them, very few. They literally left with the clothes on their backs. But they did manage to take some things with them. My father's family managed to leave with a so-called precious blanket, because that's what kept them warm on their trip. As they're sitting on the train, my father must have been 14 at the time. My Zayde said to my father, "Do you see that woman sitting over there all by herself? Take this blanket, bring it over to her." And my father was a bit taken aback. This is our only possession. We're going to give it to this strange woman? And of course, he asked no questions, and he brought the blanket over to this woman who was sitting alone, and she thanked him profusely. She was very, very grateful. And my father went back and sat with his father. My father had no idea at the time who this woman was. He found out later on that this was the Rebbe Chana, the mother of our Rebbe, who was not Rebbe yet, but my grandfather with his family had spent some time in Almata, where the Rebbe's father had been exiled. And my Zayde used to go to Reb Leivik. His name was Reb Levi Yitzchak. He was called lovingly Reb Leivik, and endearingly Reb Leivik. So my grandfather knew Reb Leivik. I don't know if he ever met the Rebbe Chana, but somehow he must have known that this was Reb Leivik's wife, and he felt it was important to give her this blanket because also the fact that she was alone. Then they made a stop in Poking. There, they also helped the Rebbe Chana a lot. There were other people that helped the Rebbe Chana. I've heard other people speak about that time. From my father, I heard different stories in Poking. She was very broken in the fact that, her husband had been exiled and he suffered greatly, and she hadn't seen her children in many years, and she went through a lot of physical hardships. But anyone that speaks about her, or anyone that has told stories about her during that time, always emphasizes on the fact that she was a very grateful person. She was very grateful for everything Hashem had given her, and anything anyone ever did for her, she was always very thankful and grateful. So my father, as a child, never met in person Reb Leivik, because he was a child when they were in Almata. And I believe my grandfather thought it was dangerous for a child to go to Reb Leivik's shul because they were afraid of the authorities, what a child might tell the authorities. They weren't allowed to have minyanim in the house. I'm not exactly sure what the reason was, but I know that my father, his entire life, had this feeling that I missed out. I could have seen Reb Leivik. I was right there, and yet I didn't see him personally. But our Rebbe, our beloved Rebbe, that of course bleibt nicht kein Balcheiv, doesn't owe anybody anything. We owe him everything, whatever we are today. Many, many, many years later, I believe I was already married. And I remember being at a Farbrengen, Chaf Av, which is the day of the Rebbe's father's Yartzeit. My father used to come from Italy every year for Chaf Av. So on Chaf Av, when the Rebbe would Farbring in honor of his father's Yartzeit, he would also call up to his place anyone that honored his father and would give him some mashke to say l'chaim. And there were people that had actually lived in Almata and actually helped the Blavik or the person that used to take care of his caver. I saw him many times go up to the Rebbe and get mashke, and the Rebbe would give mashke. I do remember one year, I don't know what year it was, I was married, it must have been Membeis, maybe something like that, but I'm not, that's not, my forte is not the years, but I definitely remember it was Chafaf, and the Rebbe called up whoever served his father. And of course, a few people that went up. My father did not go up. And the Rebbe asked again. I said that anyone that served my father should come up. And my father, of course, did not go up again. And then the Rebbe said, maybe it was the following Shabbos, when the Rebbe said that I called up people that served my father, and there is an individual here at the Farbrengen who is very humble and doesn't come up to get mashke, but I request that he should come up and say l'chaim. So at that point, I don't know who started pointing to my father that he should go up to say l'chaim, which of course my father did. And I always wondered, I know why my father didn't go up every time, because he felt he was never really personally meshamish, the Rebbe's father. So my father once said to me that maybe because the Rebbe knew that my father had given that blanket to the Rebbe Tzimchana, or maybe when they were in Poking, maybe the Rebbe Tzimchana mentioned to the Rebbe that we don't know, or maybe the Rebbe just knew, Baruch HaKodesh, but whatever it is, maybe the fact that my father helped his mother, indirectly this was serving his father. I don't know. That's just something that we stipulate. We can just, we can assume from today till tomorrow, we'll never know. So after that, the family was in Paris for a while, and from there, they went to Eretz Yisrael. And in Eretz Yisrael, of course, this was my grandfather's lifelong dream to make it to Eretz Yisrael. And I believe that once they moved to Eretz Yisrael, my grandfather realized the bracha he got from the Rebbe, that the Rebbe told him, you will get to Eretz Yisrael. He said, du wirst ankommen in Eretz Yisrael. He didn't say you in the plural sense. He said in the singular sense, because my grandmother, unfortunately, did not make it to Eretz Yisrael. She was buried in Kharkov. And after the war and in recent years, we started looking for her caver, for her grave. My father and his brother and his siblings all really wanted to go there at least once, say Kaddish at her burial place, but unfortunately, it's not there anymore. I think that a road was built over where she was buried. There's still a Jewish cemetery, and a lot of Chassidim are buried there, and they looked. My sister was there numerous times with my father. They went, they looked, and they couldn't find it. So my grandfather made it to Eretz Yisrael, and Baruch Hashem, he is buried on Har HaZeisim as he always desired. So my father must have been 16, 17 when they arrived in Eretz Yisrael. And he learned in the yeshiva there, and he was privileged to have amazing, tremendous teachers and mentors, very, very big chassidim, and amongst them was Reb Shlomo Chaim Kesselman and Reb Sheo Brook. My father spoke about them his entire life. We heard about these two chassidim our whole life. He talked about them. They must have been tremendous chassidim and tremendous role models, and he emulated them his entire life. But in his heart, his true biggest desire was to go to America, go to New York, to the Rebbe. He just wanted to be near the Rebbe. So he had a very good friend, best friend, Reb Leibel Raskin. They were friends since they were 10 years old. They actually met in Almata when they were 10 years old. And they remained best friends their entire lives. And I heard about, when I speak about him, I don't say Rabbi Raskin, I say Leibel Raskin, because that was the name my father lovingly called him. And to me, the name Leibel Raskin was always, I didn't meet him till I was an adult. And when I pictured Leibel Raskin, I still in my mind, I think of this beautiful person that's close to an angel, because as my father described him, he was like this perfect human being. Eventually I did meet him, and he was truly an unbelievable person, a beautiful Chossid, and he was so much like my father. Talking to him was like talking to my father. He walked like my father, he talked like my father, he acted like my father. When he held my husband's hand, we were walking in the street and he was telling him a story, and he took his hand and stopped, and everybody behind us stopped. It was like my father would have done the exact thing. And I was thinking, like, these are true friends. They probably didn't see each other in years, because the Rebbe sent him to Morocco, sent my father to Italy, and yet they were such good friends. But anyway, when they were Bachrim, Leibel Raskin got his tickets to go to the Rebbe and came to America, and my father was in Eretz Yisrael and he couldn't leave. Why couldn't he leave Eretz Yisrael? Because when they arrived in Eretz Yisrael, they weren't the only ones that came to Eretz Yisrael. There were a lot of refugees that came from different countries, different countries from Europe and the Middle East. A lot of Jews, a lot of immigrants came from many different places, and they were very, very, very poor. They had nothing. They had nothing to survive on. And anything anyone gave them, that's all they had. So there were some missionaries that took advantage of the situation, and they would go to these families and say, give us your children, send them to our schools, and we will give you food and clothing, and we'll help you with housing and so on and so forth. And it was very tempting. And these were Yidden, they were coming from other countries, coming to Eretz Yisrael and being taught by these missionaries other religions. So my father and a friend, I'm not sure who the other friend was, I don't want to mention names, they went to one of these missionaries, I guess the one that was in charge, and I don't know what they did, okay? My father was a very, very gentle, kind person. So I cannot imagine what he could have done to this missionary, but from what I understand, it was something illegal, something that was against the law. And he was therefore arrested for doing whatever it was that he did. So he was arrested and he was thrown in jail in Eretz Yisrael, I think for 2-3 days. And when he came back home, he said to his father, Tate, I was arrested. I was in jail, just like you. You know, my Zayda had been arrested in Russia many times. So my grandfather looked at him and said, Eich mir jail. You're going to compare the jail you were in Eretz Yisrael to the jail I was in Russia. But my father still had this on his resume. You know, he was a Chossid that was arrested and was put in jail for spreading Yiddishkeit. But now he had a record, so he couldn't get a visa to go to the United States. So as much as my father spent his days davening and learning, mostly davening, my father spent hours and hours and hours davening his entire life, whenever he could. So as much time as he spent with davening and learning, he was very busy running from office to office, trying to get permission to go to America. And Baruch Hashem, eventually, he succeeded. It took a few years. So I think my father must have been about 22, 23 years old by the time he actually made it to the United States, and he went straight to 770, to the Rebbe, of course. And he was like a fish in water. He just could not imagine being happier, in a better place. And in his mind, he thought, this is it. This is where I will spend the rest of my life, next to my Rebbe. I'm not moving from here till 120. And he observed the Rebbe's every move. When my father would talk to us, and he talked to us a lot, and he would reminisce, of course, the years that he spent near the Rebbe. He knew exactly how the Rebbe davened. I remember even one time telling us that he thinks that in davening, there's a certain word, yishlach karcha. If the Rebbe started with a patach or with a kamatz, mashlich karcha. Yeah, I have a siddur right here, but I don't want to walk away from the camera. Is it okay if I walk away from the camera a second? Yeah. Or mashlich karcha chefitim. It's after Ashrei in the Hallelujahs. Mashlich karcha chefitim lifnei karosem yamait. And I remember my father saying, I think the Rebbe used to say mashlich korfai with a kamatz. And I thought to myself, my father heard the Rebbe daven 50 years ago. And yet that had made an impression on him. How did the Rebbe say the word? With a kamatz or with a patach? So my father really, really observed, literally, everything the Rebbe did. Everything. And he just lived with it. He just lived with it. And then my father was hired to work in the yeshiva in New York, which at the time was actually in New Jersey. So he spent his days in New Jersey in the yeshiva, and of course he would be every Shabbos by the Rebbe. And I guess when the right time came to get married, I won't go into the story of my parents' shidduch, because my mother, God bless her, may she live a long, happy, healthy life. It's her story, and she tells it with all the correct details. I only say it third party. And she's also, my father was a master storyteller, and my mother is a master storyteller. So we grew up hearing stories, and everything was a story. And that's why anything my father or my mother ever tells us, we actually think we were there. We lived through it, because their stories are so alive that we actually feel like we were there. So when my parents got engaged, my mother grew up in Pittsburgh. She is the daughter of shluchim themselves. My grandparents in Pittsburgh were sent to Pittsburgh by the previous Rebbe. So this is something she grew up with. It was.
Can you just tell us your grandparents' names?
Yes, Rabbi Shalom and Rebbetzin Chaya Posner. And actually, my Zayde, my mother's father, also learned in Lubavitch. So both my grandfathers were students of the original yeshiva in the town of Lubavitch. So this was really in our blood. You know, it's Lubavitch runs through our veins. You know, we can't deny it. God forbid, we wouldn't even want to ever deny it. But it's just part of who we are. We can't separate ourselves from it. So my Zayde learned in Lubavitch. My grandparents Posner got engaged in Russia, but they got married in Eretz Yisrael 2 years later. And then eventually the Frierdiker Rebbe told them to come to America, and eventually told my Zayde and of course my Bubby to go live in Pittsburgh and start a yeshiva. And they did. My mother was actually one of the first students of the yeshiva in Pittsburgh. She was the first class of Pittsburgh. Her older siblings did not merit to learn in that yeshiva. They were sent away before. And my mother was sent away from home also at a young age, because I think the yeshiva in Pittsburgh was only elementary school. So for high school, she was sent to New York, which at the time was very far. And she only went home, I think, twice a year also, just Pesach and summer. So when my parents got engaged, at one point, my father asked her where she would like to live because, he was in New Jersey in a yeshiva. So he was trying to, I guess, prepare her life being the wife of a mashpia of a yeshiva. So she answered, wherever the Rebbe will send us. And my father was really taken aback. He was really shocked. He did not expect that kind of an answer from a young girl. At the time, that was not what people did. And that was not what young girls aspire to do, wherever the Rebbe will send us. I guess girls normally would say, I'd like to live near my mother, or I don't know. I don't know what he expected to hear from her, but he certainly did not expect her to say that. So, of course, my father definitely was on board with doing whatever the Rebbe will instruct them to do, which they both readily wrote to the Rebbe numerous times. We're prepared to go wherever you send us wherever you see fit. And again, my mother, she has done interviews and podcasts, and she actually, my parents are featured in this month's Neshe newsletter. So I believe the story is in there as well. Next month there is a second part. I don't know if the story will be in there, but whatever it is, the one thing that my parents definitely shared 100%. Here, my father was a Russian boy with his Russian mentality. My mother was an American-born girl, raised by Russian parents. So she wasn't totally a stranger to Russian mentality, but she was raised as an American girl. Just to tell you a little anecdote, when we were little, my mother used to sing us this little song in English that she had been taught in school. If you ever lost in the street and you don't know your way home, walk over to a policeman and the policeman will bring you home to your parents. And my father said, what? Policeman? That's the last person I would go to if I'm lost, because in Russia, they were scared of policemen. A policeman is going to take you straight to jail. It's not going to take you home. So just to give you a little idea of the different cultures my parents were raised with. But their devotion and love for the Rebbe was definitely something they were 100% on par. It's not something that they had to discuss or, God forbid, argue or disagree on any level. So off to Italy they went. And there are quite a few stories of their trip and on their trip to Italy and their stops. And the Rebbe gave different directives, what they should do and how they should do. And those are all stories that are written and are in interviews. And I think my father may even have said in his interview. But I can talk about my experiences. You want to know about what I observed. I'm not here to tell stories that happened to others. What I observed. So first of all, I just want you to know that the Rebbe very much lived in our home. The Rebbe was a part of our life. I didn't meet the Rebbe personally till I was 5 years old. And the second time I was 11 years old. So by the time I was 11, I only saw the Rebbe twice. I mean, I saw him many times when I was here in New York for a while when I was 5, so I saw the Rebbe a few times on that trip. And then again when I was 11. But the Rebbe was not a stranger to me. The Rebbe was a part of my family. The Rebbe was part of everyday life in our home. First of all, every room in the house had a picture of the Rebbe. The Rebbe was a part of our conversations. My father used to say, when a Chossid wakes up in the morning, his first machshava is Rebbe. And when a Chossid goes to sleep at night, his last machshava is Rebbe. And as I have been thinking about this saying my father always said, I think of my father and I say, having known my father and having observed him, I believe his every thought in between when he woke up and went to sleep was also Rebbe. That was my father's and my mother's mission. We are here to represent the Rebbe and to bring his message to the world. As a matter of fact, I just heard a story this past week, last Friday, which was the day before the Shabbos before my father's Yartzeit. So it's a tradition that the Shabbos before a Yartzeit, we make a Kiddush. Everybody, at least by Chassidim, I think it's definitely a minhag. The Shabbos before a Yartzeit, you make a Kiddush, and you say L'chaim, and you talk about the person, and so on. So Friday, which was the day before the Kiddush, we got my family received a voice note on the phone from a student that had gone to our school in Milan many years ago, about 25, 30 years ago, even more. And he said, I would like to share a story of your father, of Rabbi Garelik, that happened with me, with this young man. And he says he went to our school as a child, but then as he got older, he went to university and he learned to become a lawyer, just like his father. His father had been a very renowned lawyer in Milan that had actually been involved with my father many times when my father needed some legal work done for either the shul or the school or for different institutions in Milan. So one time, he says, as this young man had just graduated, so he was really still doing his internship. So he was really assisting his father. So he observed all this happening. His father had to go for a hearing in court concerning one of the Chabad institutions, but it was necessary for my father to be present at this hearing. And he felt a little uncomfortable asking my father to come because my father was a Chossid and he knew that my father spent his days davening and learning, and also my father dressed like a Chossid, and he thought it might be a little uncomfortable for my father to come to court. But he figured, you know what, I'll tell Rabbi Garelik and see what he says. So he actually told my father that there is a situation and how does he feel about it. My father said, I'll come to court, no problem. Of course, anything that could help a Mossad, an institution or another Jew or another person, my father had no qualms or no second thoughts about doing it. So the day of the hearing, my father comes to court and the judge is sitting there, and my father was dressed the way he dressed every single day of his life, wearing his kapote and his gartel and his hat. And when the judge saw him, he called over the lawyer and quietly said to him, isn't your client aware of the fact that in Italy, it is disrespectful to walk into a courtroom wearing a hat? So the lawyer said to the judge, Your Honor, my client is a rabbi. And the kind of rabbi that dresses in this manner every single day. This is how he walks in the street. And this is how he dresses no matter where he goes. And his hat is part of his garb. Asking him to remove his hat would be just like asking lehavdil, a cardinal, to remove his head covering. When the judge heard this, he walked down from his seat. He got up from his seat and walked down towards my father. He bowed his head to my father and he said, Rabbi, I apologize. I accused you of being disrespectful, but in truth, it is I who was being disrespectful to you. Please forgive me. Now, I'm not even sure my father was aware of this whole conversation that the judge had with the lawyer. I'm not sure about that. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. It's not clear from the message that this young man sent us. And I'm not even sure that even had he heard it, if he would have understood exactly. My father's Italian was not the best. Of course, he managed, he spoke to people, but his Italian was not, on the level of the judges and attorneys level. And we never heard this story from my father. Never heard it. But this young man says, your father just smiled to the judge with his signature smile. My father had a signature smile. My father was a man of very few words, didn't talk much, but his smile spoke volumes. He didn't have to say much. His smile just said it all. But this is my father was. He really personified and truly, when the Rebbe would send out a shliach, he would say, "Shlucha shel Adam k'maisei." When a person sends a messenger, the messenger represents the sender. And I think the Rebbe truly trusted my parents that they would represent him. I think they really did. So going back to my parents always talked about the Rebbe, and he was a part of our life. Every night when we said Shema, at the end of Shema, we would look at the Rebbe's picture and kiss the Rebbe's picture and say Gute Nacht to the Rebbe. We also used to say a little prayer that we should see the Rebbe very soon. But this was something that was very natural and very normal to us. Just like, we had grandparents in America, we had the Rebbe. He was in America, but he was part of our life. And Shabbos morning, my father davened at length, sometimes way after people went home from shul. My father would continue davening. There were these 3 steps going up to the Aron Kodesh. We would sit there, myself and my siblings, whoever was in shul, and my father would stand by his stender and pour his talis over his head, and he would daven. Most of his davening was nigunim. I have such vivid, beautiful, sweet memories of my father davening. Shabbos, he was in no rush, and he would sing, and like with yearning. And I remember distinctly, certainly one time, because it made such an impression on me, how he said Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. How long it took him to say those few words. It was Shema, and he would sing, and Yisrael, and he would sing, and Hashem, Elokeinu, Hashem. And then when it came to Echad, it took him even longer. But it was with such love and such yearning for being closer to Hashem. Not in any way, no sadness or anything like that, no. And then we would walk home from shul, and the walk home from shul was a very long walk. It's very funny because when people say, oh, the walk from the shul to our house is about, 10-minute walk, 12-minute walk, and I'm like, what are you talking about? It was at least half an hour. First of all, my father was never in a rush. My father was never rushing anywhere. My father always took his time. He was a very calm, tranquil person. And he also exuded calmness. I know there were people in Milan that would call him when there was a crisis in their business. And my father would go to their office. And I one time asked my father, what do you do there when you go when there is a crisis? He said, I sit there. He would just sit there. My father wasn't there to give financial advice, but his presence was just calming to people. So we would walk home from shul, and my father always talked to us, always. Walking home from shul was a learning experience. My father would review with us what we learned that week, and he would always talk about the parsha and tell us, expound on the parsha. And one time I said to my father, Tati, what you were telling us last week, it's actually in a sikha. I actually learned this week in a sikha. And my father said, what do you think I tell you every Shabbos? It's always sikhas from the Rebbe. You think I made up this stuff? It's always things that the Rebbe taught us. And then at home, of course, we would have the Shabbos meal. At the end of the Shabbos meal, we always all benched together. And then we would all say Tehillim. One Perek Tehillim. It was the Rebbe's kapitel. Now, I know that today this is very normal, and people do it. Everybody does it today. But back then, I don't think so. We started by Perek Samach Tes. I remember that because, and this is how we did it. My father would say the first pasuk, my mother would say the second, my oldest sister would say the third, then my brother, then my sister, then myself, and we would go in order of age, from the oldest to the youngest. And the following year, of course, the next kapitel and the next kapitel. So now when I say Tehillim, like Shabbos Mevarachim, or whenever I say Tehillim, from Samach Tes, for me, it's a breeze because I know those chapters because we used to say them every Shabbos. Now, I said I did not meet the Rebbe personally, but I actually had the privilege, the schus of meeting the Rebbe when I was 5 years old. I believe my parents at that time decided that it was time for the children to actually meet the Rebbe in person. And for whatever reason, my father was not able to travel to the States with us. My mother took us. So my oldest sister was 8, my older brother was 7. I'm a twin. My sister and I were 5. Another sister 2, and my brother 1. There were 6 of us, and we came to America, and of course it was very, very exciting. And we're going to meet the Rebbe for the first time. And my mother explained to us how we are going to behave when we meet the Rebbe. Not how we're going to behave, but what we should be doing when we meet the Rebbe. And it's been a long tradition by Chassidim that the first time someone sees the Rebbe, they say the bracha she'achayanu. So my mother told us we're going to stand in front of 770, and when the Rebbe comes out of the car, we're going to say the bracha. And she lined us up. My mother stood behind us, I believe, and we stood in a row in front of her in the order of age, from the oldest to the youngest. And as the Rebbe, I remember the Rebbe walking out of the car, and we stood there, and we all said out loud, Baruch with Hashem's name, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam shehecheyanu v'kiyimanu v'higiyanu lizman hazeh. The Rebbe was walking up the steps, and then there's like that ramp, and the Rebbe stopped on the ramp, waited for us to finish the bracha, and he said Amen, and walked into 770. That was our introduction to the Rebbe. The Rebbe stopped to listen to these children making the bracha shehecheyanu so that he can say Amen. But it was just the love that came through. To see the Rebbe stop and look at us, pay attention. And we stood there quite a few more times. It was bitter cold. It was winter. It was in Shvat. And I remember my mother saying, okay, the Rebbe's going to come soon to 770. So we would stand there. We were waiting and waiting and waiting. It was so cold. And I would turn to my mother and say, I'm so cold. My mother would say, come here a minute. My mother would pick me up in her arms and hold me a few minutes, warm me up, and then I would go back and stand at my post, waiting like a little soldier. And we did that quite a few times. And we merited to see the Rebbe come to 770 and leave 770 quite a few times. I remember, even though it was bitter cold, I remember standing there with so much excitement. It was never, let's get out of here, let's leave. Never. It was something that we treasured. We treasured every single time that we stood there. I believe my mother started this tradition of people standing in front of 770 or even inside 770 when the Rebbe comes and goes. I don't think anyone ever did that before, certainly women. But the Rebbe always greeted and always gave us a moment, of attention. And then, of course, we went into Yechidus. We had the privilege of going into Yechidus. And of course, again, my mother explained to us how we should stand in Yechidus and how we should walk out when Yechidus is over, walk backwards. We put on our Shabbos clothes, of course, and we went to Yechidus. And the Rebbe, I'm sure, spoke to my mother first, and then he asked some questions to my older sister, my older brother. And then the Rebbe asked me, which bracha do we make on bread? And I said, Hamaitzi. And then he said to my twin sister, and which bracha do we make on an apple? And my sister didn't quite understand what the Rebbe said. So she turned to my mother like to say, what did the Rebbe say? And before my mother had a chance to tell her, I piped up and I said, Bayer Priha Eitz. And of course, the Rebbe gave me a very big smile. I feel terrible till today that I did that to my sister because, I robbed her of her opportunity to answer the Rebbe. And unfortunately, that really does describe a little bit our personalities. We are very, very close and we love each other very, very much. My twin sister is a special, special person. But she was always the quieter one and I was the more feisty one. And I did speak up a lot throughout our lives. And I did sometimes, answer for her when maybe I shouldn't have. And that's one of the times. She has never said anything to me about it. And I hope she doesn't have hard feelings about it. Maybe I should ask her. But what I want to say about this is that when we came back to Italy, and of course, one of the first things our father asked us was, what happened in Yechidus? What did the Rebbe say to you? And when we told him that the Rebbe asked me which bracha we make on bread and asked my sister which bracha we make on apple, my father's immediate reaction was, oh, so from now on, you have to eat bread and your sister should eat apples. And it was just a given to my father that if the Rebbe asked you a question, what bracha do you make on something? That is the food you are meant to eat. And to my sister, that is the food she's meant to eat. Obviously, this never, I was never pushed to eat bread or anything like that. But just to tell you that to my father, the Rebbe's a wort. If the Rebbe said a word to you, that was a lesson for life. And anything that the Rebbe said was a lesson for life. So this also came through. Is this going to be edited or no? No. Okay. So a few years later, when it was time for our bas mitzvah, I always say our birthday, our bas mitzvah, because everything that I went through in life was us, was we. People say that the first year of marriage is a big, you have to really get used to being a big adjustment, going from I to we. I say I never had to make that adjustment. I went from we to we. I was first with my twin sister and then I got married. So to my husband, it was not such a big adjustment. I was used to that. But anyway, when we turned 12, right before we turned 12, we left home. Go ahead. You want to say something? So when we were about to turn 12, our birthday is in Tishrei, the day after Rosh Hashanah. My father was in New York before Yom Tov, obviously, and we were going to write a letter to the Rebbe for our bas mitzvah. And that was traditional, was accepted. People did that before their bar mitzvah, before their bas mitzvah, and the Rebbe would send back a letter with a bracha, obviously. So we were in New York for a few days, and we sat down to prepare a letter to the Rebbe, and my father told us how to write. You write Kvet Kedush Sav Mushlita, and then you write, I'm about to turn 12. I would like to ask the Rebbe bracha, and so on. And then my father paused. My father always did. My father never just talked. My father thought about it first, but we knew he was about to say something. And my father said, I just thought of something. And he started talking about the Rebbe. That the Rebbe is a tzaddik, and the Rebbe is a nasi, and the Rebbe is preoccupied with things all over the world, and of course with every single person. And the Rebbe is a tzaddik. And a tzaddik doesn't just do things. Every move and everything that a tzaddik does is calculated, and every second of his day is precious. So he thinks that maybe it would be a good idea, instead of writing two separate letters to the Rebbe, so that the Rebbe will have to, let's say, waste time reading two letters, it would be more appropriate if we would write one letter and we would both sign our names at the bottom of the letter. Well, in theory, it sounds very nice, very right. But in my heart, I really would have liked to write my own letter. But my father is a big Chossid, and my father understands, and I trust that my father understands. And of course, we agreed. Who should write the letter? Well, my twin sister is my older sister. She was born a good 10 minutes before me, and she's therefore my older sister. Yes, she is indeed my older sister, always was, is, always will be, and actually gets the respect that she deserves, and she deserves it. And I do respect her, so my father said she should write the letter. So my sister wrote the letter, and I signed my name at the bottom. And the letter was given into the Rebbe. And my father went back to Italy, and we went back to Pittsburgh. And my father told us how we should also prepare for reading the Rebbe's letter. When the Rebbe arrives, how we should prepare for reading it. A few weeks later, our Zaidi, Reb Shalom Posner, called us and said, the letter from the Rebbe has arrived. Come over after school to read your letter. So of course we did. We went, we put on our Shabbos clothes, and we went home and we got the envelope that had both our names on the envelope, and we opened it together. And we pulled out the letter. But we noticed that there was something else in the envelope. So we looked in the envelope, and sure enough, there was a second letter. There were two separate letters. The Rebbe wrote one letter to my sister and one letter to me. And I don't know if I can describe now what I felt like at the moment. I'm sure I didn't jump up and down, but I certainly felt like jumping up and down, because I felt like $1,000,000. I felt so special and so important. And I don't know if at the time I realized, but now in retrospect, when I think about it, how did the Rebbe know? How did the Rebbe know how desperately I desired, I needed this letter? I wanted my own letter. I wanted my own bracha, my own letter from the Rebbe. But the Rebbe understood, because the Rebbe is a Rebbe. And a Rebbe understands and relates to every single person, no matter their age, their status, their level of Yiddishkeit, Frumkeit, Chassidishkeit, whatever, wherever they are. A father loves every child unconditionally. And the Rebbe truly, truly understood every one of us. A few weeks later, when we went to New York for Yom Tov, we were there for Simchas Torah, and my father came to New York for the Shabbos after Simchas Torah. My father was never by the Rebbe for Yom Tov because he had a Bin Milan, but he would be there for Shabbos Bereshis. Shabbos Bereshis was special. Many years, I don't know if he was always there, but he would come for Shabbos Bereshis. On that particular year, he was there, and he would have liked us to have Yechidus with the Rebbe for our Bas Mitzvah, but for whatever reason, he could not arrange for Yechidus for us. So he told us, you know what? It's okay. What I'll do is, the Rebbe has Yechidus all night, tonight. You won't have your own Yechidus, but I will come and call you when the Rebbe goes home after Yechidus, and you'll see the Rebbe in honor of your birthday. It wasn't the day of, but it was in honor of. Very good. So we had an apartment on Eastern Parkway. Around 4 o'clock in the morning, 4:30, my father came over, and he told us, okay, Yechidus is over. The Rebbe is going to go home in about half an hour or so. Get dressed and come to 770. So my sister and I put on our Shabbos clothes. We went to 770 and we stood in the hall. There was nobody else there, just the two of us. And my father stood across the hall. There's another long hall that goes down to the Beis Medrash and to other places. My father stood there sort of hiding behind the door. And we stood there, just the two of us, there was no one else there. And the Rebbe came walking out, I remember, briskly, and it was 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning. The Rebbe had been up all night, counseling people, talking to people, giving people brachas, listening to people's problems. And the Rebbe is walking out like it was 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And the Rebbe noticed these two young girls standing there. He looks at us and he says, "Was schlaft ihr nicht? Why aren't you sleeping?" We just stood there. We didn't answer, of course. And then the Rebbe turned around because he knew my father was standing right there. He turned and my father was like, you could see partial. And he says to my father, "No, ze zijn doch auf deine Achrayes." Well, they are your responsibility. And that was it. And we went home. And that was our Yechidus. Years later, oh my gosh, I was married already. My father used to come to New York to see the Rebbe, of course. After I was married, he would stay by us. He would stay in our house. And I believe my children got to spend more quality time with my father than my nieces and nephews in Italy that lived in the same city, because when he came to New York, he actually spent 24 hours in our house. So, and every experience with my father was a learning experience. He would say good morning. You would say good morning to him. He would have a Chossid about good morning. But anyway, one time I'm sitting with my father in my house and we're just chatting about whatever. Of course, we must have been talking about something about the Rebbe, and he looks at me and he says, "Do you remember the bas mitzvah present you received for your bas mitzvah?" And I started thinking, my bas mitzvah present. What did I get for my bas mitzvah? I don't remember. Back then, bas mitzvahs were not the big parties that they do today. Girls didn't have. I think we were in Pittsburgh. We went to school. My aunt and uncle bought us a birthday cake, two separate birthday cakes in honor of our bas mitzvah. But I don't remember my parents sending me a birthday present. And I'm thinking, what did my parents send me for my bas mitzvah? I'm racking my brain. And I felt bad, telling my father, "I don't remember what you sent us for our bas mitzvah." So he says, "Do you think any other girl in the world received a bas mitzvah present like yours?" And here I was really lost. I was like, oh gosh, I really have no recollection. And then my father on his own says, "How many girls had the Rebbe say to them, 'Why aren't you sleeping?'" And I looked at my father. "You're right. I don't think any other girl in the world had that." To my father, it didn't matter what the Rebbe said. Someone said to me, "What's the meaning of the Rebbe saying, 'Why aren't you sleeping?'" I don't know. What does it matter? It doesn't matter. It could be many things. It could be a caring father. "Why aren't you sleeping in the middle of the night?" It doesn't matter. To my father, the Rebbe's avort, the Rebbe said something to you. That's what matters. It's a word. The Rebbe said something to you. The Rebbe said something to you. And this is what we lived with. We lived with the Rebbe's words, with the Rebbe's teachings, the Rebbe's guidance, the Rebbe's brachas. And we are grateful. We feel like we are privileged and, of course, held to a higher standard. This was something our parents always made it very, very clear to us. Very clear to us. We are special. We have special privileges, but we are held to a higher standard. We are an example to others. Others look at us, and we have a responsibility. We are representing Chabad, we are representing the Rebbe, and we have to be an example to others. And I truly believe my parents lived this example. They truly lived this responsibility of wherever you are, people know that you are representing the Rebbe. And I hope to follow proudly in their, I'm very proud, but I hope that they are proud of the way I follow, and our children and grandchildren. And I think that our children and grandchildren know this. They know the privilege and not to take it for granted, to just be grateful for it.
It's really special. Can you, before we continue to the next segment, can you just share with us the picture behind you?
Oh, this picture. This picture was given to the Rebbe. This is my husband as a young man when he still had a black beard, handing the Rebbe the key to the city of Milan. This was by dollars. It was I'm not sure what year it was, but it was back then the Prime Minister of Italy had sent this for the Rebbe, and somehow it was given to my husband to present the Rebbe with it.
That's pretty amazing. Okay, I'm very blessed to know you, and we'll see the next segment. I just want to say that we pre-recorded again today, the next day after, because everything happens from Hashem. It didn't record. That's why you'll see a different place where Suri spoke yesterday. But today it was so good yesterday, but today was, even for me, even better because she added so many more details, and very humbled that you were so gracious about this. But you are very lucky and fortunate to have a father like you do, who really showed you what it means to live as a chassid and be a chassid, and you passed it along. You're passing the torch. So yeah, it's very, very special. So feel very humbled and honored that you shared all the history, because a lot of the history that you shared is going to resonate with so many people. Like my great grandfather was there in Almata at the same time as your father and grandfather. So it's pretty amazing. It really talks to a lot of people. And today, not everyone has the information like you do that your father shared. So it's really amazing. So thank you, Suri, and you're amazing.
Thank you.
I'm really honored to know you.
Thank you, Chaya. I'm honored to know you. There were two separate letters, one addressed to my sister and one addressed to me. And I cannot tell you what I felt at that moment. When we talk about a Rebbe, that a Rebbe understands every single person, no matter their age, their status, their who they are, where they stand in life, where they stand in their Yiddishkeit, where they stand in their relationship with Hashem. The Rebbe relates to every single person, even a 12-year-old girl that needed her own letter. And till today, my sister was generous enough to let me keep the envelope. So I have my letter with the envelope, and she has her letter. So now we can share it with our granddaughters or anyone else that has a bas mitzvah that asks me to share the letter. I always share it gladly. But I am so, so grateful. But I think that I'm not so grateful that I got my own letter, but that the Rebbe showed me how I should behave towards others, and how considerate I should be of others, and how I should try to be understanding of how other people feel, and try to put myself in their situation, like the Rebbe put himself in a 12-year-old girl's shoes and realized that I needed my letter. And I think that's a lesson in life. That's a lesson in life, how to care for others. Do you want me to go on, or you want to? Okay, one other thing that I think that was very telling of how my father viewed or the way he educated us in our relationship with the Rebbe. When I was about 7 years old, Tafshin Lamed, I believe was 1970, Yud Shvat. Now, don't quote, because I'm very bad with dates and stuff, but I believe that's when the Rebbe inaugurated a Sefer Torah and called it Mashiach Sefer Torah. I'm pretty sure that's when it was. It was a very, very big thing. We were in Italy, we didn't really hear much about it, but what I do remember is that one evening, I believe it was Hanukkah time, a very prominent person of the Milan community came to visit us with his wife. I believe he was bringing us Hanukkah geld. I'm pretty sure that's what it was. I mean, they came to visit and they gave each one of us 10,000 lira, which is, let's say, $10. It's not $10,000. It's like $10. And gave each one of us this 10,000 lira. And there was actually, on our way to school, every day we saw there was a store on the way to school that had a doll called Patty Go. It was a doll that could walk, and it cost 10,000 lira. And we used to see this doll every day, my sister and I. Patty Go. Oh, if we could only have a Patty Go, that would be like, who can afford to have a Patty Go, Anyway, so this man came to the house with his wife, and they gave us Hanukkah. They gave each one of us 10,000 liras. When they left, we were all sitting at the dining room table. And I remember my father telling us about Mashiach Sefer Torah. There is a Sefer Torah, and the Rebbe is inaugurating it, and there's going to be a big Hachnasa Sefer Torah on Yud Shvat. And my father elaborated and explained to us and made it sound like it was, crowning of a king, which that's probably what it truly was. So my father thought it would be very appropriate if each one of us would send our 10,000 liras to the Rebbe for this Torah. Because every person is going to take part in the Torah, which of course, nobody thought twice. But I remember my mother turning to my sister and saying, Patty Go? Or you want to send to the Rebbe? Which of course, we're going to send it to the Rebbe. It wasn't even a question in anybody's mind what we want to do with this money. But it was just a given. It was just something, it was just normal. That when you have something that is valuable, you give it to the Rebbe. Because he knows, how to use it. Certainly better than us. I'm trying to think what else you would want me to.
So I would love for you to share. You said you lived in Crown Heights, like you moved. Your father-in-law was fortunate.
Yeah. He's still here
Well,
with us, Baruch Hashem.
Oh, he is. No, what I'm trying to say is, because that's what I'm saying, is the Rebbe's secretary. I was going to say was the secretary, but is the Rebbe's secretary, because he's still the Rebbe's personal secretary, what he's doing.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
And he should live till Mashiach and with Mashiach. Wonderful man. And it was interesting. I'll tell you real fast. And I told you a story about your father-in-law. I was on a cruise, and I was sitting next to someone, and this guy said, Rabbi Krinsky was just the Rebbe's secretary. He was just a secretary. And you told me my father-in-law will be so happy to hear he's just the Rebbe's secretary. This man, it wasn't a compliment. He was mocking what.
I don't care.
No, I'm just saying. So he's very fortunate to be the Rebbe's secretary, and he's a very, very special man. And so you lived in the presence, not just before the Rebbe, from your father, your parents, your grandparents, like your whole life was Chossid. But then you marry your husband, he also has the same values as you, because he's also Chossid from his side of the family. So I just wanted to know if you wanted to share a few stories, because you were fortunate, very fortunate to meet. Not many people got to meet the Rebbe's wife, the Rebbitzin.
Oh.
And lessons that you learned from the Rebbe. And I know that like you had a lot of encounters with the Rebbe. The Rebbe sent your father and mother. He chose them to be the shluchim of Italy. And today Italy is what it is because of them, because of the Rebbe, because of his vision. So when someone loves someone, they love their offspring. So I'm sure the Rebbe gave you a lot of attention while you lived here when you went in for private audiences. The Rebbe loved everyone. That's what my father's like. He cared about every single person exactly the same. But some people he knew they had missions. Everyone had their missions. Your father had a very big mission. And your mission was to live in Crown Heights and to do a lot of amazing Hachnasas Archim to so many people. And of course, to raise the most beautiful family. And yeah, so I wanted to know if you wanted to share some things later in life that you saw, your lessons you learned from the Rebbe, and also from, if you could share some things about the Rebbitzin, that would be really special and valuable. Because not everyone was fortunate to know who she was. She was a very, very private person, but she did a lot behind the scenes. And it just shows that not loud doesn't mean
Definitely.
that you're getting things done. Sometimes the quiet ones get the most done. So, like, don't underestimate the power of people that are not really on social media, or only after she passed away did everyone realize what she meant to the Rebbe, because then he started being more vocal.
Right, right. So our children know how fortunate they are that their two grandfathers are such unbelievable chassidim. Both my father and my father-in-law, God bless him, he should live a long, happy, healthy life. He's still going strong, Baruch Hashem. They got along very well. And of course, both very, very devoted to the Rebbe in different ways. My father went to Italy. My father-in-law was in New York all the years. They both respect each other very, very much. My father had a close relationship with the Rebbetzin Chana, the Rebbe's mother. I think he met the Rebbetzin Chaim Mushka once or twice, but I don't think he had an actual relationship with her. My father-in-law definitely had a very close relationship with the Rebbetzin, spoke to her very, very often on the phone. And because of my father-in-law's relationship, that's why I had the privilege of meeting the Rebbetzin. But really, really, I had the privilege of meeting the Rebbetzin because of my mother-in-law, who herself never met the Rebbetzin, but my mother-in-law had a dress shop on Kingston Avenue. And at one point, the Rebbetzin wanted to purchase a dress, not for herself, for someone, a relative, I believe in Eretz Yisrael, I'm not sure. And my father-in-law did not think it was the right thing for the Rebbetzin to come to the store and pick a dress. So he suggested that someone should bring dresses to the house so that the Rebbetzin could pick something and then not have to, go shopping. My mother-in-law was a very humble woman, and she didn't think she was up to going to the Rebbetzin. And I happened to be standing there when they were discussing it, and she said, sori. And I was like, sure, no problem. I'm more than happy to go. So first of all, I did go before that. I went the day of my Vart, the day of our engagement. I went with my chassan. My chassan made an appointment with the Rebbetzin, and we went there. And that was my first encounter with the Rebbetzin. And I was quite nervous before I went there because I thought, being in the presence of someone so great, and I felt like sort of intimidated. When I met the Rebbetzin, I actually felt that I encountered Malchus. I saw royalty, true royalty in her, physically and also in her demeanor and the way she spoke, and also the way she made me feel at ease. You could see this is someone very aristocratic, very, very intelligent, and very elegant, but also very down to earth and very understanding and kind. It all came through all at once. So I was very, very taken by her, very, very taken by her. And one thing I observed with her, and I tried to emulate, she made eye contact. And I realize now how little eye contact we do with people. When we talk to people, how little eye contact there is between people. We're so busy, with our phones or looking elsewhere, that when you talk to someone and you actually talk to them and listen to what they have to say, she was an excellent listener. She kept telling me that Italy is a beautiful country, and if this is the first time I'm here, And she was concerned how I was, adapting to being in America, even though I had been here already for quite a few years because I had been in Pittsburgh all those years. So when the second time I went is when I was bringing these dresses to her house, was about half a year after my wedding. And my husband drove me there. And before I went out of the car, he said to me, in and out. Do not stay too long with the Rebbitzin, because people come to the Rebbitzin, they take up her time. The Rebbitzin time is precious. So do your thing, bring the stuff, and leave. Okay? So I went inside, and I thought, I'm going to maybe see if I can chat a little bit with the Rebbitzin, And I hung up the dress. As soon as you walk into the house, there's a closet there. So I hung up the dresses in the closet. And she said to me, did you come here by yourself? She said it in Yiddish. Did you come here yourself? And I said, no. Mein Mann wart auf mir in car. No, my husband is waiting for me in the car. And the Rebbitzin said, a man lässt mir nicht warten. We don't let a husband wait for us. So I said, oh, it's fine. It's okay. He can wait a few minutes. It's fine. And she said, no. A man lässt mir nicht warten. We don't let a husband wait for us. But next time, tell him he should also come inside, because I'd like to have a little chat with you. Because next time I'll keep you for a few minutes, something like that. So I always repeat this because I think it's a lesson in life. Don't take advantage of someone that's waiting for you. Don't just say, oh, it's okay. They can wait. It's fine. But the way she said it was even nicer, even better. A man lässt mir nicht warten. It's a saying in our house. My children know it. They, whenever my husband's waiting for me, a man lässt mir nicht warten. I always remind my children, a man lässt mir nicht warten. We don't let our husband wait for us. That's the kind of person she was. She was very intuitive. She was very. I was there a few times because I went to pick up the dresses, and then she didn't buy anything. Then another time I brought again some dresses, and I had a little encounter with her on that as well. She kept the dresses there for a few days, and when I came to pick them up, she apologized. She said to apologize, that I should apologize to my shviger, to my mother-in-law, from her, because she kept the dress a few days and she couldn't sell them those few days. So I said in Yiddish, oh no, for my shviger is a greise kovid that the Rebbitzin wants a dress from the store. So the Rebbitzin looked at me and she said, kovid shmovid, business is business. She understood that if you have dresses in a store, you need to sell them. You shouldn't take advantage of someone and keep them in your house and those few days, she can't make the sale. So these are, I had a few encounters with her that were very telling of the kind of person that she was. And I feel very privileged to have had that. It's a big schos to having met her. That's when people ask me to tell. I don't have major stories to tell, but whatever I did hear from her, whatever I did see by her, I think I have a responsibility or an obligation to share it with others. When our first son was born, Label, my grandfather came from Pittsburgh, and my grandfather, my mother's father, was the same age as the Rebbe. And my husband's grandfather, that lived in New York, also. Both of them, both my grandfather and my husband's grandfather, learned in Lubavitch at the same time. So they knew each other from when they were Bochrim. And then their grandchildren married each other. So these were our grandfathers. So they were all the same age as the Rebbe. So when our oldest son was born, my grandparents came from Pittsburgh for the bris. The morning of the bris, my father went to the mikveh. And so did my grandfather go to the mikveh, before the bris. So my grandfather says to my father, who's going to be sandik? And my father, who's going to be sandik? For my father, you ask the Rebbe to be sandik, right? But nobody was asking the Rebbe then to be sandik. So when my grandfather says to my father, who's going to be sandik? My father says, if not the Rebbe, then you will be. So my Zayda said, okay, then we have to ask the Rebbe first. So when my father wouldn't have the guts to ask the Rebbe, we certainly didn't have the guts to ask the Rebbe. But my Zayda, he was, I guess, that, and to my Zayda, what, you do the right thing. You, if something has to be done, you do it. You don't, think 100 times. You don't make cheshbenas. So they went to 770 and they stood by the Rebbe's door. And when the Rebbe came out, my Zayda asked him to be sandik. And the Rebbe answered, why should we change the creation of the world? Meaning, something that has been already a rule for many years, let's not change it now. I haven't done this so many years, let's not change it now. Which really, for the Rebbe to do something like that, for Rebbe to be sandik would have been, really unfair to other people. Like, why for this one yes and that one no, and then start a whole new thing. That's what he meant. Like, let's not start something new. Like, let's not start something. But to my father, you ask him who's sandik. In his mind, the Rebbe is sandik. If not the Rebbe, then you'll be sandik. Obviously, he knew that we had already planned on asking my grandfather to be sandik. A year later, when we had our second son, I'm trying to remember. Yes, he was born a few days before Yom Kippur. So I was in the hospital and I was trying to get home for Yom Kippur, to be home with my children. And it was literally Erev Yom Kippur, the morning of Yom Kippur. And the baby had a little, back then you stayed in the hospital 3 days when you gave birth. Not like today, you give birth and within 12 hours they send you home. So I was trying very hard to leave the hospital. It was before 3 days, but I really, because it was Yom Kippur, I wanted to get home before Yom Kippur. And the baby had a little Billy Reuben, and they were doing, with a syringe, they were giving him, blood tests and checking his blood level. And so many times, and I was fighting with the doctors, let me out of the hospital. And I must have told, of course I told my husband what was going on in the hospital. My husband must have told my father-in-law. And Erev Yom Kippur, as I'm fighting with the doctors, let me out of the hospital, in the car, when my father-in-law was driving the Rebbe tour from 770, my father-in-law mentioned to the Rebbe about this going on in the hospital, that I'm trying to leave the hospital and the doctors are not letting me there. They want me to stay for Yom Kippur. The Rebbe said, es wollte gewesen sehr a richtige Sache, als beide die Mama und die Kind sollen bleiben in Spital auf Yom Kippur. It would be the right thing to do, that the mother and the baby should both stay in the hospital for Yom Kippur. And when I heard that, I burst out crying. I was so upset. I wanted to be home for Yom Kippur. Why did my father not tell the Rebbe that I was, why did he have to tell the whole story? But bottom line, the Rebbe said I should stay in the hospital. There was nothing to discuss. I'm staying in the hospital. And I had my licht. Before I came to the hospital, my doctor had switched hospitals and he wanted me to go with him in the new hospital. So I had said to him, I will go with you to the new hospital if you guarantee that in case I'm there over a Shabbos, they will allow me to light my Shabbos candles. He promised me. And right before Yom Kippur, he came running in and he said, Sarah, I arranged for you to be able to light your candles. Ladies, you won't believe where. In the smoking room. Back then in the hospitals, there was a smoking room, I think on every floor. So I went to the smoking room and I had my licht there. And another Jewish woman that didn't light Shabbos candles saw that I was lighting my candles. And she says, oh my gosh, you're lighting Shabbos candles? Do you have more candles? And I said, of course I do. And I brought 2 candles and she lit with me. And then there was a frum lady that had brought licht. She actually had her own licht, but she thought there's nowhere to light them, so she wasn't going to light candles. And I said, of course, you can light in the smoking room. So the three of us all lit our candles that Yom Kippur, because the Rebbe said that I should stay in the hospital. And I realized afterwards, I bet you that's why I had to stay in the hospital with over Yom Kippur. A year after that, when I went to the hospital to have our next son, we have one girl and 5 boys. It was Friday, it was Hanukkah, it was Rosh Chodesh, and in labor and nothing is happening, and the doctor's getting a little, I guess, impatient, and he says we're gonna have to do a C-section because this baby's not coming down and it's getting distress and so on. My husband said, wait, before we do anything, I need to make a phone call. And he ran to the payphone. Back then, that's what we did. Went to the payphone, called his father, who was one of the Rebbe's secretaries, and told him what's going on. The doctor wants to do a C-section. So his father said, wait, let me go and tell the Rebbe or ask the Rebbe, and I'll let you know. And he went and asked the Rebbe what to do. And the Rebbe said, wait. Wait as long as possible. Do not, rush into doing the C-section. And my husband came back and said, we would like to wait. And that doctor got so angry, started yelling at him, started giving him over the head, saying, are you going to take responsibility for a child that has all kinds of whatever? And my husband said, we would like to wait. So here we thought I'm having a C-section soon. And they were actually coming to wheel me to the operating room to do a C-section. And the doctor says, let me just check one more time before we take you in. And he says, Sarah, your baby's right here. And within minutes, I gave birth. And my husband made it home just before Shabbos, literally minutes before Shabbos. My mother-in-law, God bless her soul, made a Shalom Zachar in, I think, 20 minutes. And my son was born naturally right before Shabbos. And that week was the week of the Danatzach, which is when the books, the Rebbe's books were, I'm sure all of you know about the court case with the books that were stolen from the Rebbe's library. And there was a court case and it went on for about 2 years. And finally, these books were, the Rebbe won the court case, and the books were brought back to 770. So he was born Friday, Aleph. Hay was, I think, Tuesday, and then Thursday was his bris. So on Hay Tavis, when my father-in-law went to the courthouse and got the news of the results of the court case that we won, the joy in the world was just tremendous. And he wanted to come to 770 and give the Rebbe the good news, but he didn't want the Rebbe to have to wait an extra 10 minutes for him. He would have liked to be the one to give the Rebbe the news, but he didn't want the Rebbe to have to wait an extra 10 minutes. So he called 770. He called the Maskirim, the office, the secretaries, and said, please tell the Rebbe that we won the court case. And when my father got to 770, the Rebbe already knew about it. He had heard about it 10 minutes earlier. So as soon as my father-in-law walked into the Rebbe's room and he gave the Rebbe the paper, the actual documents with the good news, and you can imagine the joy that the Rebbe must have felt at that moment. The first thing he said to my father-in-law is to please call the Rebbetzin, that my father-in-law should please call the Rebbetzin right away and tell her she shouldn't hear from a third party. She should hear firsthand. And the second thing the Rebbe said, how's the baby doing? The baby that was born on Friday, which again goes to show a Nasi,
a Rebbe. As great as this victory of the Sfarim was, which was an unbelievable victory for all Chassidim, for the Rebbe. But the Rebbe remembered that a baby was born. How's the baby doing? Which the more I think about it, the more, as the years go by, and I remember these stories, I'm like really in awe of how a Rebbe really, really cares about every single person, every single one of us. Actually, when Leivik was born the year before, after his bris, the Rebbe asked my father-in-law if at the bris there was Chassidus said at the bris. And of course, everybody knows the father of the baby says a mimer, and it's the same mimer that everybody says by a bris. So my father-in-law said, yeah, the father of the baby said a mimer. So the Rebbe said to him, and what about the Zayde of the baby? Did he say a mimer? And my father-in-law said, he never knew that it's a thing that a grandfather should say a mimer. And the Rebbe said, what more appropriate time to say Chassidus than at a grandson's bris? So the following year, when our next son, the one that was born by Hey Tevis, at his bris, my husband said a mimer and my father-in-law said a mimer. But by Leivik, when the Rebbe said, did the grandfather say a mimer? So my father told us that the Rebbe said that. So when I came home, I told my father, the Rebbe said that what more appropriate time to say a mimer than at a grandson's bris? So that Friday night, when we eat Kiddush by the Shabbos table, I always used to bring the baby in the bassinet to hear Kiddush. So after Kiddush, I was about to bring the baby back to my room, to leave him in the room. And my father says, leave the baby here, leave the baby here. So I left the baby in the dining room. And in the middle of the meal, my father said, we should sing the Hachana Niggin, the Niggin that you sing before someone says a mimer. And my father said a mimer, because the Rebbe had said, what better time to say a mimer than at a grandson's bris? So my father took it literally, and the next day he said a mimer at the Shabbos table. So yes, my father and my father-in-law both, I can say both devoted not 99%, but 100% to the Rebbe and to perpetuate the Rebbe's message. And my father-in-law till today is still doing what he was told to do. He's still continuing what he did, what he was told to do 60, 70 years ago. And my father, till his last day, also, I think his only thought and intention in life was just to fulfill the Rebbe's shlichus. And in that, I include my mother, of course, both my parents. And we all feel very fortunate to have had amazing, amazing role models. And I can only hope and pray to make them proud.
Definitely are making them proud. And how lucky are you that you have so much, like, so many examples in your life. Like, some people only know stories like through other people, but you got to live it. Like, you got to grow up on shluchas where the Rebbe sent you and your family. And like you said, it was a privilege. You didn't feel like it was
100%.
hard. You felt like it was a privilege to be there.
Always.
And you're continuing to be on shluchas wherever you are, because that's who you are. Like, it doesn't come out of your bloodstream. You are a shlucha. And I feel very humbled that you shared your beautiful father with us. And maybe married to see him with Mashiach. I mean, he's still
Right.
working. He's still a shliach upstairs. He's working. He's working. I know there's so much more that you can say. Like, someone posted on the group something, and they wrote, it could be years for all the things and all the amazing things that your father accomplished. Like, He was just such a brilliant, incredible man. I'll say it in her words. She wrote, Rabbi Garelik was the most devoted chassid and an inspiration to all who knew him. There are not enough hours in the day to share his incredible life. I hope there will be a book coming soon.
Yeah. My brother is working on a book. I think he's up to page 800 something or other. I don't know who's reading this whole book, but I guess you can read parts of it. But he's including a lot of, there is history and there is a lot of documents. My father used to write often to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe wrote to my father. So throughout the years, my father would, of course, saved all the letters and made photocopies. And he had an album where he put in the letters. And there are letters for just about every single day of the year, like Aleph, Beis, Gimel, every month, he has for practically almost every day of the year a letter.
I knew that because my father told me. So you could just imagine they had a relationship because he told my father that. And yeah, it's so incredible that the Rebbe had such insight, who to send, what to send. I mean, the Rebbe changed the world. The whole world lit up in the Neshei Chabad community. Like, it's an amazing organization, and they gave the Rebbetzin one year a beautiful globe, and in the globe had diamonds wherever the Rebbe sent then. Today, the globe would be full because
Of course.
the whole thing with diamonds is actually in the showcase in the Rebbe's house, which is pretty amazing. Your brother-in-law is so gracious, and he opens it up for people, and it's really a gift that you get to go into the Rebbe's presence and the Rebbetzins' presence, and to see how they lived and to go for blessings. So many people get blessings there, but it's just such a beautiful thing to see. The Rebbe was one person, and the Rebbe was really like the most private person, but yet he shared himself with the world, and he changed the world, and he hand chose who's going to go where, here, there, and it's pretty amazing. So I'm really so grateful to you for sharing your father with us and sharing your life with us, and inspiring us to be better people.
I just did want to add about those letters. My father always had a letter of the Rebbe in his pocket. Whenever we got together for anything, whether it was dinner or anything, any supper that we sat on the table, at one point he would ask everybody to please rise, and he would pull out a letter and read the Rebbe's letter. It was always a part of our life. It was just, I'm not saying about when I was growing up as a child, supper time. No, I'm talking about older, when he would come to America, whatever. If we ever got together, the family got together, he would always have a letter and get up and read it. And anytime we went any place, if I ever was with my father in a doctor's office or in a train station or waiting in a waiting room, he would always pull out of his coat pocket a sicha, and he always had something to learn. He would never be sitting there idle, just looking around, or waiting in a waiting room, just looking around. He always had either a sicha and the Rebbe's letter with him. And this is what that's what he lived with. That was his life.
That's amazing. Really, so incredible.
Thank you, Chaya.
Okay, we're going to end off with a roll call. We had a very nice amount of people on tonight, 51 ladies, but throughout the program, we probably had like 57 because people went off on, from all over the world. So we're going to do a roll call. I have to give credit where credit's due. Copying is the best form of flattery. At the Shluchos and Shluchos convention, every year, Rabbi Kolarski would do a roll call, and I'm copying that tradition. And every week on our class, we put out where people are from, and it's pretty incredible to see. We have people from all walks of life, which is pretty amazing. So tonight we have with us Long Beach, California. We have Toronto. We have Florida. We have Queens, New York. We have Iowa. We have Baltimore. We have Canada. We have Crown Heights. We have Brooklyn Heights. We have Miami Beach. We have Chicago. We have Long Beach, California. We have Cedarhurst. We have Brooklyn, New York. We have LA, California. Those are the people that shared where they're from. Pretty amazing. Minnesota. So welcome, everyone. And I was asked to please tell the world that Israel tunes in, and South Africa tunes in, and Texas, who are in different time zones. And I see you want to say something.
Yes, a shout out. I'm looking at the names here. I see names here, and I see Cyril Lipsker. If this is Mrs. Cyril Lipsker, my first, second, and third grade teacher in Italy, she was also a shlucha to Italy. A shout out to her, because a lot of what I know today is thanks to her.
Well, we have a lot of special guests that comes on weekly, and I'm humbled. And I want to say Hakar Sataiv to where it's really important to say thank you. So I want to say thank you to Hashem and the Rebbe for giving me this opportunity to bring light to the world and giving me the most amazing ideas to bring out the most amazing speakers. You're one of them. And very blessed. The Rebbe is my partner in this class, and that is why it's still successful. This Zoom class still has 50 to 70 to 90 to 100 live people that come on live, and then we have a few hundred people that tune in after. So I feel very lucky that the Rebbe chose me to do this. Of course, it takes work, but it was given to me, I know. And I want to say thank you to my mashpia of this class, Shandy Jacobson. Really appreciate all the work she does behind the scenes. If I ever need anything, helps me with pretty much anything that comes up. So very humbled. The Rebbe was very about having a mashpia and having a mentor. And I believe that even organizations should have a mashpia or any activities. So I'm blessed that I have one of the best out there, really blessed. I want to say thank you to all the ambassadors of the class. An ambassador, someone that spreads light, and it's so easy. And I also, it's worth it to be an ambassador because I share my merits with you, and I believe this class has many, many merits of, so you can become an ambassador. Reach out to me. What is an ambassador? An ambassador shares this class on their chats, statuses, friends, and in 1 minute, poof, like goes out into the world, and you're part of this amazing thing. I want to also say thank you to everyone that tunes into this class, and want to say thank you to my dear nephew Donnie that uploads on our podcast. It's called The Soulful Spot. Check it out on Spotify. And of course, lastly, most importantly, my dear husband who supports me in this class and endeavors, and YouTube happens because of him. I'm not techie at all. He helps me a lot behind the scenes and supports this initiative. So I'm very thankful and grateful to him. And yeah, so God bless everyone. And may we merit Mashiach immediately. And really humbled and honored that we got to have you tonight.
One more thing I want to say to you, Chaya. One time at my father-in-law's birthday, the Rebbetzin said to him, Der Eberster soll euch benschen mit alles, was ihr wünscht sich und a viele mehr, weil nicht allemal weiß ein Mensch was zu beten. May the Eberster bless you with everything that you wish for yourself and even more than that, because not always does one know what to ask for. So Chaya, may Hashem bless you with everything you need and wish for yourself and even more.
Amen. And I wish for you what you wish for me.
Amen.
The world. So thank you so much. And for everybody, really humbled.